Welcome back inside another episode of the Brooklyn Boardroom, where we go behind the curtain and off script with stakeholders and foot soldiers in media, tech, and entertainment. I am your host, Jay Christopher, and today's topic is how to think and thrive as an intrapreneur and entrepreneur in technology. And our guest today is Cedric Rodgers. Cedric's a real heavyweight. He spent about 10 years at Apple, and he has tons of accolades that prove that he knows how to develop, launch, and execute on tech applications. So welcome to the boardroom, Cedric.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good to see you here, man. So one of the things that I before I get into the conversation, I like to start out by, the branding of the show is Brooklyn Boardroom. So I like to hear where people are from. So I think you're from Texas, right?
Yeah, Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas.
Yes, sir.
Is that like a Chocolate City situation? Or?
Oh, for sure.
Really?
Sure.
Okay.
We call ourselves the Third Coast, but I mean, we got Beyonce.
That's right,
You gotta
Beyonce's
you gotta remember now. So we got a lot of Creole New Orleans mix that comes over.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Houston is a great place, man. At one point, Black Enterprise said it was one of the number one cities for Black entrepreneurs.
Really?
Yeah, so it's got a huge Black population, but then let's say a lot of people are very entrepreneurial. So my parents, basically, I grew up in an entrepreneurial household.
Got it. Yeah, I also noticed in your bio that you went to, you studied electrical engineering at A&T in North Carolina.
North Carolina, Aggie Pride.
Yeah. No, my uncle and aunt went there. They met there. They married shortly thereafter. But the homecoming's off the chain, right?
Go.
Yeah. No, I went when I was a kid. I need to get back. But yeah, is that like the biggest Black homecoming in the South?
Yeah. Well, right now, North Carolina is the largest HBCU in the country.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
We call our homecoming the greatest homecoming on earth.
Really?
So it is the largest. And as far as the engineering school, it graduates the most Black engineers in the country.
Oh, wow.
So
heavy.
It was a great school, a great institution. I loved every bit of it. Yeah. So I got a great experience there.
And on top of that, I didn't mention this yet, but you also have an MBA from Emory.
Yes. Emory
Got
University out of Atlanta. Yeah.
Which you told me you did full time while working at Apple.
I did. So, Apple, they treated me well.
Yeah.
And so they actually took care of that while I was working there. It's not something they commonly do.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes do percentage, but I had a really good relationship with several executives that I guess we can talk a little bit about that kind of afforded me that opportunity.
Wow, no, it's heavy. I mean, look, brother, you've accomplished a lot, which is why I wanted you here, man. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from you, from your very practical and scientific, technological background, but also as an entrepreneur and kind of how you navigated these crazy streets out here. So let's just jump right in.
Sure.
So, as I described to you earlier, and for the audience that hasn't witnessed the show before, but we first start out with understanding the fundamentals, then we move into understanding the market, and lastly, we try to focus on being woke, right? Mm. So from the fundamental standpoint, for those who, and I'm one of these people who don't really understand the fundamentals of how technology works, and even how to develop or create any kind of application, just show us the roadmap, right? So as a developer and creator of technology applications, what are the key components and stages of bringing that new innovation from inception through the beta phase? And then what are the general timeframes for those steps?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I always tell people when you think of developing an app, it's kind of similar to a developer of a house, And so when you think of a home, what's the first thing you got to do when you get
foundation?
Yeah, but even before that, you got to do what?
I don't know, man. The marketplace.
Yeah, you gotta get some kind of architect, right? Lay out a blueprint.
I see the blueprint,
and you got to think about what kind of house it is you want. How many rooms, floors, and you really plan that out. And then you have that specialist.
What do you call that guy that does that blueprint?
So when you go into app development, you really have that, first of all, the ideation of the idea. What problem are you trying to solve? That's the very most important thing,
step,
right?
Okay.
Oftentimes, unfortunately, we have these ideas that aren't really solving problems, but at the end of the day, even if it's to entertain, that's still solving some sort of a problem. So I think that's the first thing, is really be thinking about the purpose of what you want to do.
Okay.
And then from there, not being afraid to take even some cues from things that are around you.
Okay.
One little thing that Steve always would say.
Steve Jobs, by the way, guys.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve would always say, he's like, we're not ashamed to like steal ideas, from other people, right?
Okay.
And then be able to iterate on them and make them better. And so, oftentimes if you look at the best ideas, they are really like culminations of other ideas, coming together, right? There's a great book called Still Like an Artist, where you really want to take time to go and take the inspiration of others. I always use Kobe Bryant as an example. I mean, if you really go look at his game, you break apart his game and you can see Michael Jordan first and foremost in his game. I mean, he took everything from MJ, but then he also took a lot from Hakeem Olajuwon from Houston, right?
I didn't know that.
When he wanted to go work on his low post game, actually Kobe was the reason why then everyone started to go working with Hakeem out of Houston, right? So everyone goes and gets his footwork because he was such a, dope big man as far as his footwork, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think of bringing all that back to technology, it's the same thing. Right?
Okay.
You're looking at kind of like, what are the kind of user interface ideas that exist? What are some of the technologies that exist that you say, okay, you know what? I want to take that and I want to put that together with this, and then go solve this problem. That's usually what you want to start thinking at the very beginning, at the ideation phase of this. But then it gets to the point where, when I mentioned before the blueprint, where you're thinking about how to, what we call wireframe out the app.
Okay.
Right? But that's after you've already thought about what problem you're trying to solve, thinking about what we call sometimes, you can give them different words, but, we always look at it just kind of the proof of concept, just kind of ideating that out. And you kind of almost write out what you want the app to do in Word. Amazon has a great way of doing it where they call it starting with the end in mind. So they'll actually have their people, and usually product managers, it's that person that's assigned to kind of really see this out.
Yeah.
Where they actually make the person write out basically a press release about the product.
Really?
Yeah, and says, here's the product, here's what we're going to solve. Today Amazon is releasing this product.
Even before you begin building anything?
Haven't touched their thing.
Wow.
And because they use that as kind of like the roadmap and guidelines to make sure they're solving the right problem, going after, because what happens oftentimes when you're building things, people start throwing other things in and it starts to move away from what you really were trying to solve.
Okay.
And so Amazon's process, and it's well documented if you want to look it up, and I even have it on my phone, I can bring it up and go in more detail, but they're really good at that. And so is Apple, where you really are thinking about what you're trying to solve. And then from there, then you move it from basically from words to more skilled, like outlining and what we call wireframing of the app. And so that's just really, I often start really with my hand, right? Just sketching them out, like on free paper, and I'll take a look of an iPhone and I'll say, okay, this one, I want this button to go. This
and that's called the process wireframing. And the person that actually does that, puts that pen to paper or tinkers around with the program to do that, is the what? What's
a lot of times. So
I just want to put one thing. I just want to make sure you get ample credit for you. That was a really poetic explanation of that in a very from a layman's point of view. So I thank you for that.
Yeah,
that's very helpful.
No worries. I mean, I'll tell you this. When I went to A&T, it's one thing about going to HBCU. We always just say, man, take it down to the bare essence. You know, just like for anyone to understand it. And also, I went through we'll talk about it, I guess, one of my other ventures. We went through Y Combinator, which is an accelerator. I think we may ask a question about that. But they focus on, like, really think about when you're writing these ideas, speak about it as if you're talking to your grandmother. Yeah. Right? Because if you can get her to understand what you're trying to solve, everyone can understand it. Totally. Right? And then, of course, you can have way more sophisticated things happening in the technology, but it's just the basic understanding has to be there.
Simplicity.
I mean, hell, some of these politicians we have out here do a great job, right?
You're right. They know how to...
So, we need to get, people understanding the same way when it comes to technology.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so who's the guy wireframing it? What's his title?
Yeah, your product manager. I mean,
a product manager's wireframing?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's when you really think of how apps, it's really, really small teams, right? Okay. So you have a designer, you have a product manager, and you have a developer.
Really?
And
just those
really
three people?
That's really all it takes because, your developer is the one that's actually writing the code. Your designer is actually the one that's taking what is basically from this wireframe and actually making it with putting it as far as the look and feel, the polish on top of it, the coloration, and Then you can also what we call the UI, the UX, which is the user interface, the user experience. So that designer person usually starts thinking about, okay, you said here's a button here, but how do we want that button to look? How we
I
want it to,
see.
react?
I
Because you can
see.
put all kinds of effects, when it comes to these things. So those two people are so core, but there has to be a person that's like leading that charge, and it's
Managing it.
always the product
The
manager.
captain.
Yeah, and so oftentimes they're called the CEO of the project, right?
I
So they have
see.
to own every idea, every portion of it.
The general. So let me ask you this. So I'm sure it varies from app to app and and market to market, but is there a general time frame that you usually employ when you're looking at ideation, designing, then developing code and all that?
No.
Okay.
So in startup, what we get into is so there's different ways to develop, right? When you go back to my background is engineering, right? So when you think of some people building bridges in the past, they build it in a way of what's called a cascading flow, right? Where they think about what the product's going to be, they map it out, and they take, plan it out, and they'll have like a 6 month, 1 year plan to get that bridge, completed.
Hmm.
But in software, we think of it a little bit differently. We call it agile development.
Agile development.
Agile development, correct. And so with agile, what we're really trying to do is quickly take what we think is what this problem we want to solve, the direction we want to go, and we really want to put it in the hands of users or at least test users as soon as we can,
I see.
right?
Get
Because
that
we
immediate
want
feedback, right?
immediate feedback loops, right? Because, the best products are able to quickly iterate to what we call a product market fit. So, and product market fit means mainly that you're solving the problem that you set out to do,
I
right? Where
see.
people are like, wow, you start to see like, wow, people really like this. And
Uh,
then once you do that, that's when, venture capital funding really comes into play. Because when you have product market fit and you're solving a problem, now it's like, hey, I just need to scale this out as fast as I can and get in as many people's hands as possible. So that's when marketing comes into play
I see.
and all the things as far as resources that you may not have when you're a startup.
Well, now, so clearly, when you were at Apple, there were these different segments and different disciplines employed in the development and launch of the app.
Sure.
But as an entrepreneur, I'm wondering, does that all collapse down to just one person like you? Because you've launched some apps. So
Yeah.
were you the designer, the ideation person, and the developer?
I mean, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
oftentimes I got a really good friend of mine. His name is Kamar Newell. He actually has an app called Flip, and he worked at Apple as well. Brother went to Morehouse. He is completely. He did everything himself.
Mm.
Myself, when I've done projects, it's usually myself starting the initial code, and I'll go to another developer to help me kind of offset that pace because it gets kind of a lot of work when you think about it. But with Kamar, I mean, he's a one-stop shop, and
Really?
Flip is doing well. It's a sneaker app. And he worked at Apple, like I said, with me, and he got on the Apple had this competition called Planet of the Apps, and he
Okay.
won.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's a perfect example of kind of a one-man army. Where myself, always done my projects at least with me and one other person, maybe two other people, and we
Okay.
get it all done.
So in the entrepreneurial space, you, Kamar, just to give us some examples and context. So to launch the two apps you launched and the one that Kamar launched, approximately how long did it take to do that from inception to market?
Yeah, so when you say getting it done, I mean, man, you can get the first ideas of an app done in, a month's time, right?
Okay.
But then it's like when you start to iterate on it, that's when it kind of takes a life of its own. And then you're asking me, so when do you decide to launch?
Yeah.
Well, if you really want to put pressure on yourself, you launch as soon as possible, right? You
Okay.
get it to a point where you feel like, hey, I got enough here that the users are impressed with what I have, and I just want to go ahead and put it in the marketplace because you learn the most when you have your product in market.
I see.
Y
That agile development, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
because oftentimes with entrepreneurs, like I said, I've also been advising, investing and stuff, and the thing we always tell people is like, man, don't wait. Put it out there in the market and learn,
I
because
see.
oftentimes we're so critical of ourselves and we want to get it just right, but that's a self-defeating kind of feeling and philosophy. You really want to get out in the
Interesting.
market because you'll see that once you put that pressure on yourself, you'll iterate, you'll keep making it better and better. I mean, there's not one app you can think of. What app do you use on your phone right
I
now?
mean, probably Instagram is one of the
Okay.
more familiar apps that I'm using on a regular basis, including Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
So if I were to show you, which we could pull up the very first, app, or version, excuse me, of Instagram, it's horrible. compared to what it is today.
Totally.
I mean, they've changed everything as far as the look, the feel, the colors. The iconography is way more simple. The interfaces, stay somewhat the same because they did have that grid.
Okay.
But, they've added in so many things since then, right? Including the DMs, right? That wasn't there.
Totally in the first.
So
Yeah.
when you go way back and think about what products are, people really need to understand that these are living, breathing organisms, right? And you got to keep investing in it and making it better and better. It's not a one-time shot.
So I think one of the most probably the question that comes up in people's minds as they learn about the process, they learn about the challenges, the team.
Sure.
As an entrepreneur, is there a general price range on this process? Like to launch an app, or if I was hiring you back you just finished at Apple and you were out looking for work, and I was like, hey, I got a great idea for an app. It's called Snapchat 2, whatever. What would something like that cost me to have you do on your own?
Well, so now, man, prices have gone down significantly on getting apps developed. Now, you can go contract, right? So if you're a person who doesn't know anything about development and just want to get an idea out, you can find contractors that you can say, hey, I got this idea. They're dev shops, and say, hey, I would like to get this done. I mean, you could get stuff done now, $10,000 to $30,000 easily.
So the starting point is about 10 grand on the high end, 30. And you said dev shops? What's that?
Development shops.
You call them dev.
Dev.
Yeah, that's a parlance in your business, right? Yeah. Okay. Dev shops.
Dev shops. Yeah.
Got it. Development shops, 10 to 30 grand.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Easily. Now, I would it just really depends on the idea, right? If it's something you think is something that's quick and you want to get out there, you're really more, just a business person, but you don't want to get too deep into the technology. It's a way to try it. But I would also say, though, oftentimes, you want to get as much as you can for as little as possible when you're being a startup CEO, right?
Totally.
You're thinking like, okay, what can I do to maybe contract one developer, not a whole dev shop, that does it.
Well, what about this? For the people out there who heard what you just said and said, yeah, but, I heard my buddy, went over to China or India and did it for.
Yeah.
Is that a practical point? Is that a practical approach? And is it worth the savings? I'm assuming they can do it at probably half the cost of what they do it here for.
Yeah, you definitely can save money by, offshoring, outsourcing the development. But I can't think of, like I said, this is the interesting part. You can't think of a lot of startup companies, however,
that did that.
Have done that.
Yeah, that is successful. That's a good point.
Telling. It's about building a team. It's way more than that, right?
Yeah.
Now, I will say what often happens, just to kind of peel back the curtain on some things. Sometimes people will go ahead and develop their own iOS app, so that's for Apple.
Okay.
But then when they get ready to go do Android, because they already got a lot of what they know they need, basically learned all the things they want to know through the Apple platform, they'll go and contract out to go get an Android app done, right? Because Android is a different ball game because it's so many different devices. It's written in a different language that's a little bit easier to go kind of pay and get somebody to turn one out for you pretty quickly. That's often what you'll see happen.
Interesting. Okay, well, clearly that's a technique. If those of you listening to this need to save some money, do it on the Android platform in China or India or Jamaica, wherever you can find the developer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so listen, moving forward, we actually touched on a lot of stuff already about the key people critical to the process, the time frame, the cost. And just working with that budget real quick, that 10 grand or that $10,000 to $30,000. If you were to segment that according to the designer, the developer, the product manager, how would you chop that up?
Most of that money is going to be going to the developer.
Okay.
Yeah. Design is kind of a front end thing, and you can get it a one quick shot at it. You can $5,000, $10,000. If we're doing a $30,000 app, can be done in design.
I see.
And then most of the time and the hours are coming from the developer who's making it all come together.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
All right, so here's one of the most important question out of the questions that I ask you about this process, because we know price is important, time frames, deadlines, who the players are. But I bet you, considering you were a student under the great Steve Jobs, co-founder and CEO of Apple, I'm wondering from your point of view, what type of mindset and perspective do you need to adopt in order to bring that tech idea to fruition?
Yeah.
And what'd you learn from Steve about that?
Well, I don't want to say I learned directly from Steve. I work with Steve a little bit.
Okay.
Actually, who I actually got a chance to really work with on several projects was actually Tim Cook, current CEO.
Oh yeah.
But I would say though, overall, Apple's philosophy. Apple looks at everything in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways is if you can look up Picasso's iteration of the bull, and you can Google this right now and pull it up, and you'll see that's this big burly bull. But then you'll see though that Picasso kept doing as many versions of that bull till you got to a version of the bull that looks basically like a stick figure. But yet you can still know
See
that
that
it's
it's a
still is a
bull.
bull. And I think that's really Apple's philosophy. If you look at how they create technologies, it's all about trying to remove as much as possible to get to the bare essence of what the technology needs to be. Um, but then that's one element of that. And so thinking that way, that's a very artistic view. And so Steve always said he wanted to stand at the intersection of liberal arts and technology.
Wow.
Apple would often hire people like yourself from the arts, right, in different variants phases. We would always go get musicians and artists and
Wow.
those different kind of folks because they would bring uh, that piece to the technology. Often, one of the things Steve did way back, he actually took a calligraphy class,
I
excuse me,
remember hearing about that.
and he basically because he wanted the fonts on the Mac to be that crisp and precise, and so the company's always had an appreciation for art that way. I do as well, and for design, and you think of like some of the best companies ever. They usually have a dope CEO partner with a dope designer.
Mm.
And it happens often in other areas too, though. When you think of music and film and you start looking and peeling the onion back, you kind of see that these guys, like a Donald Glover as an example, man, he's killing it right now, right?
Totally.
Because he has full appreciation, but people don't understand. He knows the technology of the arts because he's a writer, right?
That's right.
He's done so much comedic writing, and so he
That's right.
understands the real core of his business. And so I think that's what really is a kind of advantage and opportunity for people of color in technology, which is to leverage what we natively are
That's a good
and
point.
then bring that to technology, right?
That's a
Because
good point.
we lead culture, right,
That's
in
right.
this country, which leads culture in the world. And a lot of people have been talking about this for a while. I think Steve never really said the word culture, but he always did talk about, artistic and being very much in the way of what I said, liberal arts. But if you start to peel back the onion on that, you start seeing it. Think back to the old iPod commercials. You remember?
Oh yeah.
And you would have all those silhouettes,
That's right.
and he would always have music
Yeah.
and dancing.
That's right.
That's us,
That's
right?
right. That's
He would
right.
he would use that to sell the technology, right? And that's why Apple was super smart and has always been about trying to tap into that. Nike does it as well, and they make all this experiential, of course, marketing, and Apple does too. But I think that's the essence. That's really the core. And the reason why they bought Beats by Dre and those things, because it's about owning elements of that, and leveraging that into getting people to buy the technology, because that's what leads it.
No, I love. I mean, I love it. You really. I gotta give you another one of these, man, because you really dropping bombs, bro. Lots of us to focus on here. The harmony between art and tech, harmony between business and art, harmony between product and art. Right, that's super important in order to really leverage whatever the product is you're trying to launch. Because no one wants something that's super productive but is just ugly to look at.
Right.
It's an eyesore, or that's not really functional in a tactile. It doesn't respond to
Exactly.
the human expression, right? So, wow, really good point, man. I think which is again why Steve and Tim have been able to do what they have been able to do
Yeah.
with Apple. And no shade on Bill Gates,
No.
Microsoft. I mean, but it's a different business,
No.
and it doesn't have the same type of the cachet and the allure.
It's so funny. It took a while for that to finally catch up, right? Because, Steve came out with the first personal computer, which everyone was like, wow, cool personal computer. Then the IBM compatible, and of course, Bill Gates was behind that with the
Yeah.
software, and really made it and put the focus on the enterprise. But it took a long time for people now to want personalization of their technology, even at work. But it took, man, it's what, 30
Yeah,
years
no,
or
decades,
more, right? But
decades.
before it happened, but you know what led the charge on that? It was the iPod. It was the iPod that changed the whole game on that. Then it went from the
Wow,
iPod to the iPhone, and then he got into the iPad.
that's right.
And so that was kind of, and some of these things were the things I worked on when I was at Apple. And so they were, it was like this halo effect, you know, and making people want, like, man, why I want my software for work to look like the same software I have on my iPod that's really cool and easy to use. I got this little cool little click wheel. I want that same little, you know, experience. But it wasn't until Apple was able to really get a product to the masses, you
I
know,
see.
beyond what a personal computer can even do, that it really started to wake people up.
I'm curious though, as a quick aside, did that long-term vision was that shared with the masses of employees at Apple? Meaning, hey guys, we're going to start with the iPod and we're going to end up at the new Apple, desktop, or the iPad. Was that?
So the way Apple works, though, they have this meeting annually. It's called the Top 100, and so in the Top 100, a lot of that kind of strategy is shared, and some of that, of course, is not even shared in that room. But the Top 100 are the top 100 executives across the company that they share these to, and it's kind of grown a little bit more than 100 people, but that is where Steve would show, kind of a little bit of product line, because Apple doesn't even really show product line to, let's say, other corporate partners or anything. They keep it all internal.
Really?
And so that was always a complaint, when I would be working with other partners, and like, well, we want to see what's coming next. And I was like, we don't show what's next. We don't do that. But in that meeting that's shared, and that philosophy was shared. Now, so going back to really answering the question, I think it really centered around iTunes, right?
Okay.
Once they said, hey, we got this software now, we can make it easy to, of course, get music onto the iPod. And then once Apple really woke up to the phone, because they were going to do the phone first.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so they did the iPod, then they went back to the phone.
Wow.
So it was really that was Steve and his vision. One thing he always would say, and I think this is very relevant to the conversation, he's like, really good executives have to learn how to see around corners. Really understand, kind of looking at the environment and be able to think about where things are going. And he would often quote this Wayne Gretzky quote where you say, we want to skate to where the puck is headed, not to where it is. And so Wayne Gretzky always say, people ask him, like, how are you such a great hockey player? He says, well, because I skate to where the puck is headed, where everyone is skating to where it is. And so, Steve Jobs took hold of that quote and kept that, right? And it's really, really paramount when you think about that, because even no matter what business you're in, so oftentimes we can get caught up in the moment where we are, but not really thinking about where we're going. And one of the ways Steve would say to do that is like you have to learn how to zoom in and zoom out. So that means, pay very close attention to the detail of where you are at the moment, but then also zoom back out, kind of take this like 300,000 foot view of where you are and be able to say, okay, but now how does that play into this whole entire landscape?
Wow.
And so that's some of the things that I think I took away from my time at Apple, right?
Totally.
And oftentimes Tim Cook is known to be more of an operational minded person, which he is, but he has a lot of great vision too, because he knew what Apple needed to do to go into China. See, Apple started really killing it once it went killing it in China.
Oh, I didn't realize
a lot of
that.
people didn't realize that. Yeah. So when he lined Apple up strategy-wise to do everything in China, to get, of course, all the parts well ahead of time and getting at these low prices. And so he did a lot of great things operationally that prepared the company to really, execute and leverage its position
and seize the market. That ground game, that groundwork, that digging, right?
Yeah.
I think real quick for those millennials watching who don't know who Wayne Gretzky is, he was the Michael Jordan of hockey. I think he played for the LA Kings, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. So guys, do the math, know your roots, know your culture. You heard? So but this is a great segue because you're talking about getting into the details, also understanding the big picture. So we're going to segue now into what's going on right now in the market, right? So tell me, with all these new tech startups and mobile apps flooding the market, like what is the venture capital market like right now for tech entrepreneurs? Like because you mentioned Y Combinator, which is an accelerator, which we'll get into, but like you're a guy who's, got lots of ideas, has successfully turned those ideas into, tangible, real applications. But like you're always probably on the lookout for new opportunities to partner and find money. So what's that like right now?
Yeah, it's an exciting time because if you're thinking about especially for people of color, I'm
Okay.
gonna stay right there for a hot
Yeah.
second. Um, oftentimes it's difficult to create a startup because what happens is, capital is like oxygen, right? You get this, or even think of it like a runway, and you're trying to get your plane off the ground. And
Totally.
if you run out of runway, man, your plane is going to crash. And so
Totally.
you need that capital. And oftentimes you need that to get the initial team together and seed the right product. And so it's no question why like a Facebook is successful. When you go back and look at the history of, Zuck had no problem getting capital, right?
Yeah.
And so when you say, well, how is that landscape now? Well, there are a lot of diverse investors out there now. They're creating a couple of I would say accelerators or even incubators, but they're just flat out venture capitalists. Here in LA, we
Okay.
have like Marlon Nichols, who's with Cross Culture Ventures. He's really looking at for diverse people, who are creating entrepreneur, creating companies. And
Okay.
then there's Arlen Hamilton, who just actually announced, I think it was a couple days ago, she got 36 million awarded to her through her LPs to go ahead and now invest in Black women
What you
founders.
use LPs? What's that?
Ah, limited partners.
Got
Okay,
it.
I'm
Got
sorry.
it. Yeah, my,
So,
my, 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 my audience may not be as
yeah,
sophisticated as you,
yeah,
Cedric.
no,
No
no
MBA
worries.
from Emory.
No
You know what
worries,
I'm saying?
no worries, no
So
worries.
limited partners, guys. And by the way, he's dropping names and figures, so you guys pay close attention. So go ahead.
Yeah. So just understanding just at the highest level, when you think of what happens in venture capital. So you have a venture capital firm that comes together with partners, and then they go raise money themselves from all kinds of major institutions, banks, universities, give them money, and they say, hey, we're going to give you a return on this money. And how we're going to do that is that we're going to go invest in these startup companies that do exceptionally well. And then, of course, we'll give you a return, annually or however they want to give back the money to partners, right? So that's how the VC game works. But then there's also this thing called angel investors too, right? That's an individual, like you could be an angel investor, right? Most of angel investors have a gross of $200,000 annually, and they choose to invest in startups. So that's the kind of, really the 1-2 that's out there for investing. And what's happening is, going back to the venture capital side, there are more of those that are coming about, and they invest at different levels. Some of them invest at what we call the pre-seed and seed stage. That means you just had an idea, you haven't done anything, and you
Exactly.
just want to get the initial maybe $200,000, $500,000. So there's more and more popping up that want to invest in that level. And then there's the seed stage where, so you got a product now, you want to do a little bit more. There's people investing there, and then it goes for, of course, Series A, B, and C, and on to the hopefully some kind of a liquidity event where you're, going public or being acquired or something like that. So with that being the case, what's happening for people of color now is that there's more people getting into that game
Okay.
that are of color, that are looking to help people of color.
I see.
And so, there's several that are in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
And then there's, like I said, here in LA, more and more popping up here. And even in New York. So those are some of your larger, and in Atlanta, because, I do a lot in Atlanta too. So there's
Okay.
several markets where you're starting to see people that are purely looking to invest in diverse founders. So with that being the case, I would say that the market is getting somewhat better, but the bar is also raising. And what I mean by that is that because there has been so many people wanting to get into the game, they're looking to see if the idea is really good, right? And they want to see you put in maybe a little bit of your own skin in the game, meaning you finance a little bit of yourself early on to see if you
Totally.
can get a little traction or something to come back to them with that really, really makes sense. So, because you think about, it used to be a lot more money that it would take to start up a startup, but now it's a lot less because you can get, services from like Amazon Web Services and set up your infrastructure at a very, very low cost or free, even in most cases. You got Google has all their free,
Yeah. Sweet.
service. So with all those things now, it's really kind of easy to go spin up a company. The question is, are you really solving a real need?
Interesting.
So
So let me ask you this. You mentioned, all of these entrepreneurs or venture capitalists, better yet, and some angel investors. Is there any particular forum or event that brings them all together a few times a year that would make it easy for the folks listening to be like, okay, I'm going to make sure I get to that event because they'll all be there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if everyone here has heard, but Blavity.com. Morgan DeBon, she's an excellent entrepreneur friend of mine. She's now they have created what they call Afrotech, and so it's been the
Afrotech.
last it's 2 years now they've been running it. I actually spoke the first year, and then the second year, they had some really great entrepreneurs to come speak, or just not even entrepreneurs, but even folks. Bozeman, she was with Apple now. She's over at Uber. She's one executive VP there, black female, really exceptional. She gave a wonderful talk last year.
Yeah, Bozeman St. John, guys,
Yeah.
former Apple executive, like you said, former Pepsi executive, friend of mine, and incredible woman.
Incredible woman. So she actually spoke and gave she brought the house down with her stuff. And
Sure.
so it started, I think, at roughly 500 or so. Now it's getting 1,000. I think next year I would not be surprised to get 2,000 or more
Wow.
of all of us in one room. And it's not just, and like I said, it's not bringing just entrepreneurs. It's bringing anyone who works in tech. So if you even want to get into the game and go work for the Apple or Google, like, they're
Networking.
represented there for networking, and they're actually even doing recruiting. They were even
Really?
recruiting last year, man.
Wow.
They're putting together a really, really great program. And so I would say anyone who really has some real interest,
Get to Afrotech.
get to Afrotech.
Get to
Definitely,
Afrotech,
definitely,
guys.
definitely
That's
worth
no
it.
joke.
Yeah, I got a nephew, man. He's finishing up at MIT computer science. I took him last year. He had a great time. I'm taking him again, next year because he's ready now to go.
Wow.
He won't have a problem with employers, but
Yeah,
but for
yeah.
everyone
No,
here-
MIT, but you failed to mention that you helped him on that path because he was looking at something else originally. So you had to mentor him a little bit into the whole MIT.
Yeah, that's funny, man.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us growing up in the hood, like you want to play ball. And he's not that good.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, man, I was still at Apple at the time. I was like, yeah, your crossover ain't what it needs to be.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
show you this thing called iOS. And so got him interested in coding, man. He was in the 7th grade. And
Wow.
so yeah, got him that early coding, and
Amazing.
he's a bright kid, and he's not even that much of a kid anymore, but he's a bright guy. And he took off, and he got into robotics, programming, and then he got a scholarship to MIT, and so he's doing.
But it started with that conversation
Yeah.
you had with him, and he respected what you had to say because of the relationship, and he respected
Exactly.
your own success, right?
Exactly.
So that's a testimony to just how important it is to just impart the wisdom when we can with the young people coming up behind us, because they don't have to make the mistakes some others have made if we're involved in their life and their growth.
Right.
So well, listen, man, you really, this is a great interview, by the way. I think I'm learning a ton because I'm not I don't know this background, so I'm taking my own notes. But so here's the other question I have about the venture capital space and the money game.
Sure.
So assuming all money isn't the right money, right? What are the most effective ways to evaluate a potential investor partnership relationship? What would you consider, and should we be considering accelerators, incubators, if we already have the capital we need?
Okay. Yeah, that's a layered question.
Yeah,
but,
no, totally.
I think, venture capital and just investing in general, it's a relationship, right? It's like, they need to show some interest in what you're doing and ideally have some knowledge, right, that they're bringing, because a good investor is going to not just give you money, they're going to give you access, to additional investors, maybe potential partners for your idea, and that can actually push you as an entrepreneur to move things forward. And they're going to they shouldn't be taking over, but they should definitely be, pushing you to go further. And, what has actually hurt, a lot of people of color in the past is that it is kind of a nepotism that takes place. Like, not kind of, it's definitely a nepotism. Let
Interesting.
me just be clear. Like I mentioned Zuck before. Like Zuck, a white guy coming out of Harvard, he's intelligent, but he can go into a room and raise money easily. Oftentimes you can take a brother who's the same, who could have gone to Harvard, but may have had challenges to raise money. And sometimes that's about getting access. So that's why an Afrotech is huge, right? So you can be in a room with
Access
people
to
that
the
you can
capital.
get access to capital and the people and make the connections. But, So with that being the case, you got to find people who are like-minded. Doesn't mean you have to be the same race, but you definitely have to be like-minded. People who can then see you as like your gifts and say, yeah, I see why you are going to be the person that's going to see this through, because entrepreneurship is tough,
Totally.
especially in the tech game. I mean, it's ups and downs. As an example, look at Snapchat and Facebook. Right, and these are two white guys, right?
Yeah.
But listen, look how your boy over Snapchat is getting his lunch eaten.
That's right.
Facebook went and got, of course, Instagram, and they really pretty much turned Instagram on Snapchat,
That's
right?
And
They still
to your
everything
point
for
earlier,
stories,
innovating what's already out there.
yeah, man,
Innovating and creating on top of what exists.
And so anytime, Snapchat gets innovative a little bit, Facebook leverages the Instagram property and steals those ideas. And even like to the filtering that all the women
right,
like, all
that's
that's
right.
in Instagram now, just
That's
like it is in Snapchat. So it's a dog eat dog game. And
Yeah.
it's not always about who you are and what you do. Because the guy from Snapchat, he come from money, right? So, but it doesn't matter, and so did Zuck a little bit. So they're just going at it. So what I say that to say that investors are looking for the person who's going to see that through, who's going to fight that fight. Who's not going to cower away from those kind of challenges. Who's going to be up in the middle of the night, making sure that everything is moving forward. So there is a real, kind of litmus test that they have on their end as far as the investor. But then on the same end, you as the entrepreneur needs to be looking like, is this investor going to have my back? Are they going to be with me as I may need the next round of funding? Are they going to help lead for that? Or at least continue to help push me forward? So those are real questions you have to ask yourself when you're getting a chance. But oftentimes for us, we're just happy to get money, right?
Totally. The check shows up. We don't ask any questions.
Man.
I don't care where it came from. Right? Yeah, exactly.
And it happens in film too, right?
Yeah,
it happens in everything
of
that we
course.
do. And so we're sometimes at a disadvantage. So I say all that to say that, when it's your first time out, it doesn't hurt to try to find the incubators and accelerators who are sometimes the groups that will be a little bit more nurturing in nature for you as your first time entrepreneur. Finding angel investors that may have done this a time or two that you can find.
Totally.
So you mentioned accelerators. So I was fortunate to do what I've done 3 startups, and I've done 2 that have actually gone. I've approached Y Combinator the first time.
And by the way, guys, just so he said that nonchalantly, but Y Combinator, and this is something I've learned from Cedric, is the creme de la creme of accelerators out there, right? So it's the Harvard University of business accelerators. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and so some of the companies that we all may know, they've gone through their Dropbox, Airbnb, Box, Instacart, and go on and on and on of companies that have gone through this program. And it's a 3-month program. And so it's very difficult because they have thousands and thousands of applicants, and they do it twice a year.
Okay.
And then you apply through a written application, a video, and then you get a chance to do a 10-minute interview. So yeah, it's 10 minutes. Like, so you sit you in front of all the 3 or 4 partners. You come in, you pitch.
It's a real gauntlet.
Yeah, it's a gauntlet.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing to pledging that I've actually done in a corporate world.
Like in an intellectual business capacity.
Yeah, they try to put you through it, the whole process. And so I say that to say that there are programs like that even if you don't get in, because I didn't get in the first time, right?
Okay.
I applied and got the interview, but then we kind of bombed the interview.
Yeah.
And so I went back and did it again. And that time we did get in. And so, that process teaches you so much. You learn more about. So I remember I mentioned about iterating on your actual product, but there's also iterating on your business, which is your business model right? Is there changes that need to be made? Is it a bad idea? Because when Y Combinator, they're looking for 4 things, and this is what every investor is looking for. So I should say this.
Yeah, please.
First and foremost, they're looking for: is it a good idea?
Is it a good idea?
Is it really solving a problem?
Okay.
With that, have they created a good product to solve this problem that I can see and demo?
Okay.
And have they actually already launched this product and has it received traction, right? So that's the other one, so it's the idea.
The idea.
It's the product.
And
it's traction.
Well, that's 3. There's a 4th.
There's one more.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, who's the team?
Who's the team?
Like, is it a team of people that I think can scale? And so with Y Combinator particularly, where oftentimes people get hurt there, is that they don't have a technical co-founder, someone who really can code. They're always looking for that to be a part of your team, because the way they view it, and I think they're pretty much right, is that you have to have that one person that if something breaks at 4 o'clock in the morning, you ain't got to call no customer support to no other shop that's working for you.
You're not outsourcing in India, brother. You got somebody on the payroll that knows what they're doing.
Exactly right. You got somebody on your immediate, and not even a payroll, right? You want somebody who's even working for free.
I see.
Right? They got equity in what you're doing to where they up at night with you getting that
Making
solved.
sure it gets done.
Because they say, like, this is our chance together. And so you need that one person at least.
So I want to make sure, I'm going to drop a bomb on this. I want to make sure you hear this. When we pull up, we're going to go through that one more time because there are people here who aren't going to accelerators. There are people here who are just kind of trying to figure it out. And I think those 4 things you mentioned are critical for any business endeavor if you're looking to take it serious as a business. So we're going to go through it one more time. And by the way, usually our episodes don't go this long, but I think this is such a valuable conversation. I want to make sure we capitalize on your time. Cool. So product. Number 2 was.
So first, you always start off with the idea.
Idea. Is the idea dynamic?
Is it a good idea?
Is it a good idea?
Does it solve a problem?
Does it solve a problem?
Y Combinator, I'll say this, always says, make something people want. It's just that simple.
Make something people want.
And then the moment you do that, then you're going to be that means it's a great idea and it's a great product, right?
Got it.
So then once you build that product, have you going to launch the product and getting traction?
Are you getting traction? What's the market saying? What is the street talking about with that product that you have?
And traction doesn't mean it has to be the 1 million users right away, right? It can mean that you've gotten 1,000 users that love it.
Got it.
But that 1,000, if you took it away from them, be like, where is that product?
Got it. Right? It's critical.
That's what you want.
People
you need
care.
That core user base that says, I like this, I rock with this, and I want to tell other people about it.
Got it.
So that's 3. And then 4, from an investor's perspective, they're looking at the team. They're saying, hey, okay, they might have kind of gotten lightning in a bottle, but is this the right kind of people to solve this, right? To continue to push.
Can't just have one genius on the team and the rest of them and your mans and them and your cousins and no. Exactly. Everybody's got to carry their weight and be contributing in a real way.
Exactly. And those are the 4 things that every investor accelerator, they're looking for those. And if they articulate them all differently, but that's the core.
So Cedric basically said, guys, if you look around on your left and your right and you can't answer those questions and the people around you can and you don't have the right people, start over.
Yeah.
Just scratch it and start over. So we're moving forward here because I think this is going to be a real important segment, which is how do we stay surgical and woke in this marketplace that you laid out for us. So here's my question. So what are the realities, and you've talked about some of this already for Black entrepreneurs or Black people in tech, that there is a distinction between, the dominant culture and then our culture in terms of accessing capital, right? So you've identified that. Now, but also what I want to know is, what are some of the hard lessons you learned the first time you tried to raise capiple and launch your app?
I'll talk about capital, and I can also talk about lessons in general, just doing these businesses. For me, the first time out, I've left out of Apple and I had a pretty good scenario financially for myself. And I said, oh man, I'm just going to do this myself, the first project. And I took money out of my own pocket. And I took too much money out of my own pocket. I think what we have to learn quickly is that, yes, you should put some seed capital from out of your own pocket and invest and bootstrap. Okay. But you also want to be able to put it in front of investors, because what they'll do is they'll tell you if you're really working on something good or not. Sometimes they're wrong. Don't get me wrong. Investors aren't always right. But you want to put your product out there as fast as possible and iterate before you spend a whole bunch of your money. Because you see people go broke. See, people don't talk about the hard side of this game. There's a lot of people I know who have lost a lot of money trying to create startups, right? And have negatively impacted their lives, where they could have probably, even a guy like me, I could have stayed working at Apple making great money instead of trying to chase somewhat this dream. Yeah. But it's not for the faint of heart. And so you really have to be mindful of, okay, if I'm gonna put this money out here, I need to be really critical about what it is I'm doing and how I'm going to make this business work. And then, like I said, put your stuff in front of investors because they're going to tell you, what if you're onto something or not.
Okay.
I think that's very, very important when you think about what you're doing with your money. And what was the other part of that
Oh,
question?
the hard lessons learned as an app developer, launching an app.
Yeah. I think to me, the core thing of it all is, like I said, what Y Combinator says, make something that people want and don't be afraid to make quick changes. Listen, they always talk about get out of the building. Like oftentimes what happens is, especially with technical people, we want to stay in one building. We think we have all the answers and we want to sit there and put it together. It's like, they're going to love it. But have you talked to them?
So you've been that guy that didn't have those conversations
Man,
early enough.
Not enough of them.
Yeah.
But the moment I started, even on the very first startup I did, the moment I started talking to them, I realized what was right,
What was
working, and what
missing,
wasn't
yeah,
missing, what was missing, and what was actually
wasn't.
working.
Got it.
And then you can double down on that. Oftentimes, like Apple does, you can start removing stuff. It's like, man, this is not needed. That's not needed. That's not needed. We just need to focus on this one thing. And can I monetize that? Because it's great. Sometimes you can solve problems, but if you can't make any money on it,
What are you
what are you doing?
Moving,
you need to make a nonprofit.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And essentially, that's what I should have did with my first one.
Well, hey,
made it a nonprofit. But
learn.
you live and learn. But I think those are some of the hard lessons, and you can't do this game alone when it comes to startup. I mean, there's been also a lot of, things coming out about just mental health and wellness and like keeping a balance and keeping your family and having that real solid foundation. Because like when people go out and create startups and they disappear, which we could talk about a lot of them if we wanted to go down the list, and they were hugely successful, and then, or even ones that were moderately successful, then they fail. 95% of startups fail. Might even be 97%.
Wow, that's crazy numbers.
So at that point, you got to say to yourself, okay, I got to be honest with myself that I need to keep a solid foundation, talking to people, having people work with me on this, because, I don't want to be on the island and put myself in a state of despair on this whole thing. So that's a very real thing. Because like I said, I failed.
Well, I'm gonna give you pull up on that because I think mental health is very important these days and age. And, not like you said, not getting too caught up in what you're trying to do and thinking about the balance that you need in your life, because the odds are crazy and they're stacked against you.
Yeah.
So my last question before we break, man, is and I'm not sure how you can answer this, but and maybe you already have, I don't know, but I'm curious to hear, because I think there's all kind of nuances in every business that you often learn after the fact, right? Subtleties and stuff. So what are some of those subtle nuances in this business in particular that you can't learn working at Apple, you can't learn getting an MBA from Emory, you can't learn as Kappa Alpha Psi, whatever, right? You just what was that? What would you point out?
Man, I'm glad you brought this question up, because I think at the end of the day, it's a people business. Every business is a people business. Comes down to that eventually, whether it's how you manage your people and how they engage with the product for the consumer. I think Amazon, I give them credit. They do a good job of this. They keep the consumer in mind always. That's why if you have a problem with Amazon, they'll return it no problem. No problems asked, right? And they're really maniacally focused on that. And I think when you pull that back, it's what we call, when I even got this from my MBA, they talked about it, but I didn't really understand it. It's like emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence,
how to really engage with people, whether it's people you're working with, whether it's your consumer, really thinking about that, because that's that thing that puts people over the top. And you look at most executives, eventually they get there. And that's what it takes for your organization to have that feel. And to do that, even for me, it's humility.
Got it.
It's so funny, when you think of a K-Dot song, Be Humble. He really was on to something there.
That's
because,
right.
Oftentimes if you get a little taste of a little success, you kind of
start smelling
yourself, or even in the pursuit thereof with building a product, you're just thinking you know it all, and it's like, nah, you gotta really kind of find every way to stay humble, connected, and keep an emotional intelligence high, because those are the things that are going to keep you iterating on the product, making the right hire, talking to the right investors. All that's led from that core piece. And I think that's something, I've had a few lessons on.
No,
right?
we both can relate. It's just a matter of time. I can, yes.
And I'll throw that in because oftentimes with these startups, you're not founding them alone, right? Your co-founders
That's
involved, and
right.
you're working with other people, and it's like a marriage on that side
That's
too,
right.
right? And you got communication and like empathy and all these words, man. When you're growing up, it's like what do they mean? But when you really get deep into business, you start to see like those are the keys to success.
Because that can be your lack of humility can be a real barrier to your pocket
Yes, sir.
and to your success and to whatever the goal is. So I think it's a very simple, thing to remember, but not a simple thing to incorporate into your life,
Yeah.
especially if you're a person who's used to being successful, being that guy, or being affiliated with that organization. And to have to step back and be like, well, I'm not so hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just like everybody
Yeah.
else. So,
And I'll add one more other thought just for your audience too. It's just, when you think of who we are, we have to kind of continue to understand how we can leverage culture to our benefit. When we think about designing and developing, solutions, how are we really thinking about our own needs?
interesting.
And like thinking about culturally what's hot for us.
Totally.
Because when you do that and able to, really make it real in technology, always does well.
Totally.
And so I think that's another thing that we often got to continue to
Leveraging
find.
culture for us.
Yeah, got to continue to find ways to leverage culture. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to never forget our past, right? Thinking about all the people that inspired, the differences of, the music and song and dance and the arts. Like there's so many people that we stand upon the shoulders of and saying that we continue to keep them in mind and think about their artistic. I mean, I always think about, some of the best music producers, all they do is take old school music, right?
That's right. Replicate it.
Replicate it, take inspiration from it. I think that's some of the thing that we want to continue to do when we're solving our issues. Because if we do that, I mean, it's like I think it's the core of us, and it's like I think our competitive advantage.
Wow. Well, listen, brother, you dropped some heavy stuff on us. Picasso, humility. You know what I mean? Yeah, you definitely have, your experiences, life experience at Apple clearly did a lot to enrich your perspective on business. So I'm very, very, very take my hat off to you and thank you for what you shared.
Appreciate
And
it.
I think that the audience will really value this conversation as well. So thanks for coming through. Definitely come back when you've broken 10 million or 20 million or your next big adventure.
Yeah.
And you can share what's working, what's coming up in your brain.
Yeah, we got something new coming real soon.
Clearly. Well, you told me a couple things, so
Yeah.
I'm excited to see that happen.
All right.
But anyway, so this has been another episode of the Brooklyn Boardroom. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Make sure you find us on the Google Play and the iTunes, and or just look for me on any social media platform at BK Boardroom. All right, deuces.